Hey, Prestonwood.Live, it's Jack Raymond, online pastor. Well, we just wrapped up this past week our Beatitudes devotional series. Loved getting to teach that with several of our amazing staff. So I hope if you missed any or all of it that you'll go back and check it out. We'll drop a link in the comments to that series as we walk through Matthew 5 verses 3 through 12. And what does it look like to live a blessed, approved by God life and to live fully for Jesus and for His kingdom. And today, if you're watching this on the first day or maybe a couple days later, we are just 2 weeks out from Easter. Right now, we're about 2 weeks and 2 days away from Easter Sunday, and it's got me thinking so much on the resurrection. In fact, we're celebrating the truth of the resurrection this Sunday, which I'll mention again in just a minute, but our devotional comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and the power of the resurrection. In fact, the whole chapter is Paul writing about the resurrection and how it changes everything. The fact that Jesus defeated sin, defeated death, that He is alive. The great news of Matthew 28 verse 6, that He is not here, but He is risen, and He is risen indeed, that today, 2,000 years later, Jesus is alive. Because in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says this in verses 13 through 14. He says, if there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. There's no resurrection at all. Verse 15, and if Christ has not been raised, then our proclamation, our sharing of the good news is in vain. It's worthless, and so is your faith. That's how foundational the resurrection of Jesus and ultimately the resurrection of us in Christ is, that this is what our faith is based on. And so Paul is saying, in fact, in verse 19, he says that if the resurrection is not real, we should be the most pitied. People should feel sorry for us. But the truth is that Jesus did defeat sin and death. The tomb is empty. In fact, I want to share with you, Jeremiah Johnson's going to highlight it this Sunday at Prestonwood, his new book, Body of Proof. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on the Prestonwood Bookstore, PrestonwoodBookstore.com. And it's just an amazing book. I'm excited to continue to read it and study it. Highly recommended from Pastor Graham and from so many other great Christian leaders and thinkers. And it really is he calls it the 7 great arguments, the 7 strongest arguments for how we know without a doubt that Jesus is alive, that the tomb is empty, that the resurrection is real. And he was just sharing with our staff about it. And one of the amazing things I never knew, and perhaps you may not know as well, but during Jesus' time, during that time period, there were many messiahs, many people that claimed to be the Messiah. They would even have followers for a season. There were countless messiahs. But you know it's crazy. Now, 2,000 years later, you know how many of those messiahs still have followers? Anybody who followed them? Only one. And it's Jesus. He's the only one. You can look back at ancient history and you can read about all these other messiahs. Well, why do they no longer have followers? Well, because they died. And so ultimately their followers died or they stopped following them. But with Jesus, He defeated sin. He defeated death. And the fact that He's alive, Acts tells us that Jesus appeared to more than 500 of His followers, that He changes the life of His half-brother James, and James becomes one of the great leaders of the early church. And because of that resurrection, because of the resurrection power of Jesus in us, it changes the way we live. So if we jump all the way to the end of 1 Corinthians 15, this is the challenge and the call for us because of the resurrection, because of the truth, the certainty that we can believe that science, that archaeology, that history, everything proves that Jesus defeated sin, defeated death, that He is resurrected, that He is alive now and forever, and that we one day will be resurrected with Him as well. So this is the way Paul concludes this thought on the resurrection. He says, verse 58 of 1 Corinthians 15, therefore, so all this is building to this call, to this command. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling, abounding in the Lord's work, because you know that the labor in the Lord is not in vain. Your labor for the Lord is not in vain. So whatever God calls you to, He's got a purpose. And he's got power to it because the resurrection power of Jesus is in you and it's working in and through you. And so remember, your labor for the Lord, your labor in your family, your labor in your community, your labor in your small group, your labor in your workplace, it's not in vain when you work for God, when you work for Jesus. So be steadfast. Hold fast to the truth of Jesus, the truth of his word, the truth of his resurrection. Be immovable. Don't let society, don't let culture, don't let lies push you down or move you from the truth of his word. And then always abound, always excel in the work of the Lord. Keep working because you know God is going to use it in a mighty and a powerful way. Well, speaking of mighty and powerful, I know God is going to move in a mighty and powerful way this Easter. So I hope you'll join us in praying. Hope you'll join us in inviting others to be a part of our online services, or if you're in the area, to invite them to be a part of our in-person services at Prestonwood Plano, Prestonwood North, Prestonwood Espanol, Plano North, or Louisville, or online at Prestonwood.Live. God is going to move in a mighty way. Jesus is going to save and change and transform lives. And let's remember, be steadfast, be immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for your labor is not in vain.